Mr. Price, could you give us an idea of the issue from your platform that you're most passionate about right now, and how your district has been impacted by COVID-19, and how you've been attempting to help your district with the impacts of COVID-19?
Sure, I'm glad for the chance to talk with you and through you to the students at NC State. I am running for re-election in the 4th Congressional District. The district is changed considerably from last time, largely because of a court-ordered redistricting, which, by the way, has gone on far too many times because the Republican General Assembly has continually gerrymandered the congressional districts. But now we have yet another district, and it's got the 4th district in about 75% new territory. Includes all of Durham County now, and Orange County, and most of Chatham, and a good portion of Wake County, but a different part of Wake County, not including the main campus at NC State, but no doubt including a lot of students and faculty and staff from the university. So anyway, it's still a triangle district. It's still a district where I'm going to consider myself accountable to citizens throughout the triangle area. And I look forward to representing North Carolina State alongside, in this case now, Deborah Ross, I think, who is in a good position to win in the 2nd district. We will share the representation of Wake County. You asked about the main things I'm campaigning on. Of course, right now with the pandemic and the economic downturn and the pressures for racial accounting and racial justice, and with the president diagnosed with the virus, but still behaving in very strange and irresponsible and reckless ways. These are just these are difficult times, and I think the first thing we've got to do is crush the pandemic. That's not particular to the 4th district. It's a national priority. I have been part of the formulation of the successive relief bills. My portion, I'm chairman of the Transportation and Housing Appropriations Subcommittee, so my portion of the bills particularly has to do with the kind of support our transportation systems need, the kind of threat people are facing with respect to evictions and not being able to meet their rental and mortgage payments, the need for some special measures to be taken with public housing and public transit. That whole range of issues I've been particularly focused on, but I just think the main priority for the country is to crush the virus and to get this pandemic under control. Only then will we be able to stage an economic comeback.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's see. You've answered a couple of my questions with that response. So focusing now more on issues facing our students, what are the most pressing issues you'd say are facing your district for college-age students? And what are some of the ways you're going to seek to remedy those issues, both including COVID or things besides COVID as well?
Well, these aren't normal times, and nor are the issues facing college students and colleges and universities the normal issues. You have to say that for our universities and the students who want to get back into campus life, the main issue is also the pandemic and the mishandling of the pandemic by our national leadership. It's very, very hard to reopen our states and reopen our campuses when there still is a national program in place for testing and tracing and for getting the critical equipment where it needs to get. We have furnished some financial support for universities as they attempt to reopen or undertake these hybrid schedules, and of course we'll continue to support that. But there's a huge stake at NC State and other colleges and universities in getting this pandemic under control. Longer term, I have long been a champion of Pell Grants, of reasonable student loan provisions so that people don't graduate with a huge burden of debt, but that they can access the funding they need to complete their education. So I understand that need is not going away. In fact, it's likely to be more acute in the wave of the kind of economic distress that COVID causes. With NC State in particular, there's probably no university, no question about it, there's no university in my district that I've worked with more closely over the years than NC State, because it is the land-grant university in North Carolina, or one of two, and it is a university that is closely tied to government at all levels, whether it's research funding or these centers for the development of alternative energy, or the extension program, or the research into everything from how to dispose of swine waste to how to protect our crops from various kinds of pests, and all the rest. I mean, North Carolina State has a wonderful array of services that it provides our state and our country, and a lot of that requires partnership with the federal government. I think the leadership of the university would testify that I've been a good partner, an attentive partner, and no matter what the district looks like in terms of exactly what part of Wake County or this or that, I'm still going to consider NC State a really, really important component of our local economy, our local educational system, and really a crown jewel of the state of North Carolina.
Okay, so on the topic of sort of federal involvement, what would your response be to postgraduate students who say their biggest issue is student loans or debt, and how could you deal with that issue among college students, especially now since people are having issues paying even their rent, let alone student loans and things like that?
Well, I fully support forbearance for student loans and for rent, for that matter, in the pandemic circumstance. We have enacted some forbearance provisions, and we need to continue those. We need to see people through to the other side of this pandemic. That's what's at issue right now in Washington about the COVID relief in general, but it certainly applies to the support for colleges and universities and for students. So I do want to see that through. But you know, there's been a longer term problem with student support during the Obama administration. We removed the middleman from the student loan process. We got the costs down, the terms improved. We need to continue to improve the terms of student loans. We need to have, I would say, very generous provisions for deferring the loans if you need to, or forgiving the loans if under certain circumstances, including people who take on public service or who take on jobs that serve the community but really don't pay very well. There needs to be some accommodation made on the part of the student loan program for their repayment. And so I think loans are in many cases a legitimate part of a financing package, a way to finance your education. But we need a better ratio. In the case of low-income students, we need a better ratio of grants to loans, and the loans themselves need to have very reasonable terms. You know, it's ridiculous that you can't refinance them, for example. You know, why should people with student loans be in the worst position, worse than people borrowing on the open market for other purposes? That's ridiculous. So I'm for a continual effort to make loan portfolios manageable and to make the terms generous, so that we support students as they enter the workplace, and we encourage them to take on public service jobs, teaching jobs, other jobs that are not as remunerative. You know, the student loan program should support them in that, not be an obstacle.
Okay, so in what ways do you plan to make North Carolina more diverse or more welcoming for minority communities?
Well, the state is in many ways becoming more diverse. Certainly, when I first came here, when we came here with our family back when I first took a teaching job over at Duke, the state had a large African American population at that point, but very, very small Latino population, very, very non-diverse in other ways. So we have a continuing challenge as people find our state attractive and seek their fortune here, seek to put their stakes down here. We need to have the community to be welcoming. We need this of course applies to the all too evident structural racism that's built into our community's institutions and practices, and this is made very clear from these police killings that have continued to haunt us, but also the impact of COVID. The impact has not been equal. It's particularly been hard on the minority communities. So we need to be sensitive to that and deal with it, and of course make certain that educational opportunity, housing opportunity, other things are robust and are available and are fairly administered. I've been, as the head of the Transportation and Housing Appropriations Subcommittee, I've been a champion of fair housing, housing that is housing policy in this country too often has been an instrument of structural racism, not a cure. We need to, of course, to reverse that, and I think we're on our way to that. We also need to look out for other minority communities. For example, the Trump administration has refused to protect transgender individuals in the situation of homeless shelters. We've moved against that. So you ask a very broad question. It's on this country's agenda. It has to be on this country's agenda to remedy deeply seated racial prejudices and practices and institutional setups, but also to understand that diversity has many aspects. And in our state right now, and on the university campus, we're aware of the awful immigration policies of this administration, and the kind of practices that just aren't acceptable. So I put immigration policy on the docket as well for a long needed overhaul.
Mm-hmm. All right. So in what ways then could you make North Carolina more sustainable or more environmentally friendly? And what are your plans to address or combat the changing climate and environmental impacts?
Well, this is something we need to approach nationwide, of course. It's not unique to North Carolina. I have, as chairman of the Transportation and Housing Subcommittee, we have written in resiliency standards and environmentally sound building practices for all housing and transportation programs. And of course, promoting transportation alternatives, not just building more lanes out on I-40, but developing transit as a serious alternative, promoting bikeways and pedestrian improvements and so on. This is these transportation and housing policies have environmental impacts. Nationally, we have you might say a lot of repair work to do. We've been playing defense with the Trump administration when they do just absolutely atrocious things, like pulling us out of the Paris Climate Accord, or doing away with the Clean Power Plan, which was a consent-based state-by-state plan for reducing power plant emissions, or just gratuitously reducing fuel efficiency standards. I mean, all those things have been very, very damaging at a time when the evidence about global warming and the peril that it poses, from more severe hurricanes to these wildfires, to it is just closing in on us. And there has to be a sense of urgency about this, and kind of an all hands on deck mentality. And with the Trump, you actually get denial of it, and you get reversal of the progress we had already made. So there is repair work to be done in terms of putting all those pieces back in place, developing serious research, and NC State is central to this, on renewable energy, solar and wind, and getting the portfolios of the power plants more oriented toward renewable sources, putting reasonable goals in place to be entirely operating from renewable sources. So yes, it's a national agenda. It is a very, very high priority, and it's something to which NC State is making a great contribution. I think as much a contribution as any university in the country.
Mm-hmm. All right. So how can we make North Carolina safer in regard to tragedies at schools or universities, and how do you plan to push for gun safety in Congress and continue to advocate for its passage in the Senate and the executive branch?
I've been a very strong supporter of gun safety measures. I'm a vice chair of the House Task Force on gun violence prevention. My wife is the founding chair of or founding director of the North Carolinians Against Gun Violence, has worked on this issue for years. I've been many, many times on the NC State campus and other campuses working with student groups who are concerned about this. We, again, this is not unique to North Carolina, although we've had our share and continue to have our share, not just of shootings, but just day by day violence in the streets, violence in our communities. So there are some common sense measures that I have long advocated. If we're going to have background checks, and we most certainly need to keep guns out of the wrong hands, out of people who are dangerously mentally ill, who have violent records, who have records of domestic abuse and so forth. You know, those background checks need to apply to gun shows and to online transactions. They can't just apply to half of the gun sales. They don't really mean much. Actually, they actually have some effect, even applying as they do now. But they need to apply 100% to gun sales and transactions. We need to get the assault weapons, in my view, off the streets entirely. We need to have red flag laws, as they call them. This tragedy 5 years ago with the 3 Muslim students who were killed in Chapel Hill. If there had been a red flag law, that guy who did that had an arsenal of weapons. He was bad news. There should have been restraint exercised. His weapons, he shouldn't have had access to weapons. Red flag laws can take situations like that and make them far less lethal, to get guns away from people who are a harm to themselves and others. One thing I've had some success in is removing the effective ban on research on gun violence, and that as a public health matter, we now do have some research funding flowing that'll help us understand some of the root causes of gun violence and some effective prevention measures.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I've just got a couple more questions. So healthcare coverage is a primary concern for a lot of students, and people between 19 and 24 are the largest group of uninsured Americans. So because students are part of this group, they're covered by their parents' insurance or school insurance. So what's your plan to make sure every student is insured?
Well, the provisions of the Affordable Care Act, which are now in jeopardy because the Trump administration has been trying to basically sabotage the act, and now they're in court. and now they're in court trying to overturn the entire act. And they have nominated a justice to the Supreme Court trying to ram her through here on election eve. And she is publicly committed to repealing the Affordable Care Act. She said so. She's criticized earlier decisions which upheld the act. So it's in jeopardy. It's a really important question in this attempt at a Supreme Court packing, and it's also an important issue with respect to the election. So the first thing is to protect what we've got, and the Affordable Care Act, of course, says that an insurance company, no matter what kind of insurance you're talking about, cannot discriminate against you or deny you coverage or charge you more if you have a pre-existing condition. That needs to be safeguarded. That safeguard is in place, but it's in jeopardy. Also in jeopardy is the requirement that that young people up to age 26 can be kept on their parents' insurance policies. That's been an important answer for a lot of young people and a lot of, as you say, a lot of students. The Affordable Care Act needs in various ways to be improved and expanded. And most certainly in North Carolina, we need to expand Medicaid. That's 500,000 people right there who aren't covered, who could easily be covered if it weren't for the stubbornness and partisanship of the North Carolina General Assembly. So again, these solutions aren't all particular to North Carolina or to the student population. Students benefit from families in general being covered and having more options. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have made improving the Affordable Care Act and moving closer to universal coverage an important part of their platform, and I strongly support that, mainly by including a so-called public option in the Affordable Care Act, which will help ensure access and reduce costs.
Mm-hmm. All right, so do you plan to drastically change anything about your work if you win in this particular election?
Well, I've been at this a while, and have over the years, I hope, been adaptable. You know, we've learned how to serve the district more fully, and of course, we'll continue to be open to that. But I do think my brand is pretty well established as a representative who's available in the community, accessible, who has good office operations, good constituent service, good responsive, quick service to whether it's to individuals who might get into trouble with their veterans benefits, or an institution like NC State that needs help with getting some overseas scholars cleared to come to campus, or getting its grants through the process, its grant applications through the process. There's just a range of things. So I'm going to be in a position of national leadership. I will be, once again, the chairman of the Transportation and Housing Appropriations Subcommittee. I will be the chairman of the House Democracy Partnership, which is a congressional bipartisan commission that works with emerging democracies. I place a great stock in that foreign policy work. And by the way, we haven't talked about that, but that's another area that the Trump administration has driven into the ground, and that we're just going to have to work very, very hard to restore America's world leadership. So anyway, I'll have those leadership positions, but we will continue to keep a close focus on the triangle, on the local community. You know, a congressman has to do both things. You have to exert national leadership and take on policy roles, but you're only one of 435 people doing that. In the local community, you're the only one of those 435 who is the representative of the 4th District of North Carolina. So I understand that. I understand that I and my office are the link for many, many people with the federal government, and that we need to be mindful of that. Be open to all viewpoints and respectful of all viewpoints, and be responsive, and also give a service where people need help in dealing with government. So I hope to I hope to continue what I believe is a positive record in the past, and of course, always be open to ways to improve.